Greetings, it is I, Titus Nair of Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Alright, where we last left off, we've been diving into the modern world a little bit. Let's do some more information about the modern world and running in it. So there are certain times where your players might not have the resources or the skills they need in order to complete the task. Oftentimes, this means they can turn to some kind of facility that may have these resources, these equipment, or might have the appropriate skills, actually, to accomplish this task. Now, this does require time and money. This is like sending away to some kind of forensic lab for information, equipment, the skill that your players might not have in forensics. That's a good example of it. The book basically gives you some examples of what it is, what the facility is, what kind of resources it is, what kind of skill you're going to be getting from this facility, what kind of time it's going to take for the facility to process this information, and then information that if you're using the facility yourself, the skill bonus it grants you, or if the facility is rolling on its own, basically to do its own skill for you, what the bonus is in that case. Either case, it's granting this bonus to the specific skill that the facility is effectively made to do in this case, or this facility can handle. Some facilities could probably handle more than one type of skill as appropriate to the facility. Time and money for these, but it might help out your players for something that they need that they can't do. Now let's talk about the hazards of the environment, because the fact is, adventurers, heroes, as much as they're always going into places where there's villains or possibly monsters that can deal with them, maybe just thugs, the environment, beyond these things, can oftentimes also kill them. So it's not just the villain, it's not just the creature. Very nature itself will try to murder you. I'm not going to go into full details about all of these. I'm just going to give you as much details as I feel is appropriate to each of these things. If you want to use one in the book, I would recommend checking it out yourself. I'm just going to give you an idea of what it means to use these. Light and dark. The fact is, in majority of D20 modern games, you're human. Granted, because this is based upon Dungeons & Dragons, you could easily interpret some of the other races that are listed in Dungeons & Dragons into this book, and use the rules for them. But humans, we don't see in the dark. Maybe something you might be dealing with has the technology to, or itself can see in the dark. So you might need a light source, especially if you're exploring an ancient trap-filled tomb, you might want to see what's going on there. In this case, light sources are listed in the book and what they give to you, and how long they usually last. This ranges from, of course, a torch to something like a flashlight. You might also have to deal with extreme hot and extreme cold. Extreme hot might give you heat stroke. Cold, hypothermia. Now, granted, once you've exposed to it, you're going to have to try to resist it. And eventually, though, you might start failing. You might start taking effects from this, taking damage more often than not, which cannot be healed until you get into a circumstance where you're not under the effect of this extreme hot or extreme cold, and you could recover from it. You will be using fortitude to resist this, and it's important to note if you take any damage from this, you will be fatigued. Also, if you have the survival skill, you can use it to attempt to mitigate some of the factors in it, make it a little easier to survive in these extreme hots and extreme colds. Full details in the book. Fire. If you're exposed to fire, you might catch on fire. You will need a reflex save in order to avoid catching on fire. Should you catch on fire, you will take fire damage every turn you're on fire. You could either then jump into a body of water to put yourself out, or try to roll around on the ground. Both could eventually put you out. The water's pretty quick. Now, if you have no food or water, you could starve, or thirst, respectively. It can happen. Water, you have about a day's worth of water that you can survive, plus 1 hour per point of constitution score you have. So this is not constitution bonus, it's the score you have. So if like you did 14, you could do a day in 14 hours. Then you have to start making constitution checks, which get more difficult. The longer you go on them, failure is really bad. Food, 3 days, And then you have to start making constitution checks with that one. Again, it's going to get worse the longer you go. And the effects of these, similar to with the hot and cold, cannot be healed until if you're starving, you get some food in you, or if you're thirsting, you get some water, some liquid into you. Until you get those, you cannot remove the effects of starving or thirsting. Now, if you're underwater or in a vacuum, you can't breathe normally. You need air to survive. You can hold your breath a number of rounds equal to your constitution score. You will have to then start, after that, making constitution checks to continue to hold your breath. As soon as you fail one, getting more difficult every time, you first go unconscious, dropping to 0. Next round, you go to -1, and then you die. Smoke and other possibly toxic gases, beyond if it's a toxic that would have an effect if you breathe it in, oftentimes is choking and obscuring. Smoke is choking and obscuring, which you will have to make checks to see if you will be choking from it. Also gives kind of missed chances because you can't see through it. So smoke kind of sucks, but some other kind of gases can actually work exactly the same way, that it would obscure your vision and cause you to choke. Now let's talk about choking and strangulation. Because guess what? Things could cause you to choke. Or the most mechanical version of this is someone could strangle you. They function similar in a way. They both attempt to cut off your air supply and cause you to eventually suffocate. For the strangulation side of it, it will require someone to actually initiate a grapple with you. Granted, this will of course occur attack of opportunity like any grapple, and someone, if they want to choke you, can only do it to a creature that's a size larger than them, or a creature a size smaller than them, or anything in between. So same size, larger or smaller by one size. Yeah, so I can get a one size category larger, one size category smaller, same size as me. Alright, once I've initiated it, anytime I would do unarmed damage, I can choose to initiate the choke, or maintain the choke. I will have to maintain said choke for a number of rounds, so I have to hold on to this grapple, equal to their constitution score, after which time they follow the exact same rules of suffocation as I was talking about before, have to make constitution checks. As soon as they, getting more and more difficult, as soon as they fail one, they hit 0, then -1, then they suffocate. Exact same rules. This is how it works, similar to something that might be choking them out, not person, but manually. The fact is, as soon as you can break free of this, regardless if it's someone's hands, or maybe a rope, or something else, they can breathe again. Yes. If you can no longer escape from it, or break the grapple, then you're going to keep choking. As soon as you can possibly do that, somehow, like use escape artist, break the grapple check, the choking ends. It's done. It is important to note that if someone is grappling you and hasn't pinned you, then you can choose to choke them back. Basically, if someone's holding me down, I can try to get my hands around their throat and choke them back for trying to get me. I can use my unarmed strike against them. Now, this is one I'm going to go over in the most detail, because guess what? It's the most common way for anybody in any game, in any environment, to take damage: falling. You know, it's very easy in so many circumstances for people to fall any distance and get hurt. If you're falling in this game, every 10 feet you fall deals you 1d6 points of damage to a maximum of 20d6. That's the terminal velocity damage for you falling. Now, you are allowed a reflex save, DC 10 plus 1 per 10 feet you're falling, to see if you can basically take half damage from this fall. Okay, so at most it would be DC 30 if you're taking 20d6. You can also, though, use some tumble, DC 15, to basically reduce the distance and damage and the reflex DC by 10 feet. Doesn't really work if you're really, 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 really high up. It's still like, rather than 300 feet, 290. But if you're like at 100, it's only 90 then. Easier. Not so deadly. Now, falling object, well, it deals damage both on its size and how far it falls. If this object, based on its size, falls like 10 feet or less, it will do its base damage, which is defined by the object. If it falls for every 10 feet above there, it does an extra d6 of damage, up to a maximum of 20 d6 you're adding on. So basically at 210 feet, it would do its size plus the 20 d6, and that's the maximum amount of damage it would do to you. Now, there's a reflex save DC associated with this, depending on the size of the object, and this DC will, of course, allow you to half the damage you're being dealt. Fine objects never deal damage. They're too small. The wind resistance against them makes them that they don't do any damage when they hit you. Might be sore, might be like, ow! Like the old adage of like the penny falling from the roof, it's not going to kill you. It just kind of bounces off and hurts. Hurts a bunch. On the other hand, if you fail your reflex by 10 or more, and the object is 3 or more size categories larger than you, you're pinned under it. You might need to use strength or escape artist to get loose, but basically you're under it, you can't move. Depending on what it is, it also could possibly suffocate you, but that's also, there's a lot more to determine the effects of being pinned by this, which is based upon what your GM feels is appropriate, depending on what object has just fallen on you and how it's pinning you. So, situation could modify a lot here. So, that's it for today. I first talked about using some facilities that provide equipment or skills to you, and either basically hiring them on, it's going to take time and money, or using them yourself even. Again, both ways take time, money. It's a relocation of resources that you have, which both time and money are, in order to basically use some kind of skill, to figure out something, to help you along the way that your players might have. Then I dove into the environmental hazards. There are a lot of environmental hazards, basically things in the environment that when they affect you, they do bad stuff. Again, like I said earlier, I didn't go into full details on any of these. I just gave you enough that you understand what it means to encounter these. And if you want to use them, you have a general idea about it. Some of them I went into more details than others, like falling, because that's a good one to know about. It's more than likely going to come up in one of your adventures at some point in time. It's the most common. There are a few more, which I will be covering next time, as that's what we're going to be doing next time, finishing up the environmental hazards, and then we're going to move into talking about friends and foes. Your enemies, your allies that you might be encountering on your adventures. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you would say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. Got some great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.